Good evening. Welcome. It's the Friday night, the 24th of January. And what I'm going to do in this video, I'm going to try and tie up 3 or 4 different threads. And I hope it will be interesting for you. I have here a map of the Mediterranean, Black and Caspian Seas, and part of Central Europe and North Africa. And the map is showing the connectedness through past times of this area, and how the Romans were the ones to really lay one of the main foundation stones for Europe, the Middle East and North Africa. And this is easily forgotten and ignored by people, unfortunately. On this map, it's interesting because we are led to believe that the Roman Empire fell about 404, 410 AD. This is what we're taught in school, those of us who have done some history, and I don't know if it's still taught today, but I believe that's still a little bit of a common idea, but it's not the case. In fact, the Roman Empire existed right up until 1453, but of course it changed, it evolved, it expanded, it shrunk. There were many changes over that period of time. Looking at the map, I'd like to point out some features. Italy actually faces towards Greece more, and perhaps, Cyprus than Egypt and North Africa here than it does, say, towards Britain or even towards Western Spain. And so Italy really was a fulcrum point from which the Romans were able to utilize and bring about their great empire, because it gave them access to Greece, Eastern Mediterranean, to the islands, Corsica and Sardinia in Sicily, Carthage, North Africa, and then eventually through to Spain and over the Alps into France and Britain, of course. And then as they expanded, the Rhine and Danube rivers formed natural frontiers for them, and they were able to defend the river crossings with walls and forts and ditches, etc. Emperor Justinian came on the throne in 527 AD. So this is maybe 110, 115 years after the fall of the Western Empire, if you call it like that. And of course, Gaul had been taken over by the Celts and the Franks and the Lions. Spain was ruled by the Visigoths. They had traversed down through Greece, up through Illyria, over the Alps, through Spain, and settled here. Another German tribe called the Suevi occupied what's now northern Portugal. The Vandals had crossed over and settled in North Africa, and still today you'll find blonde-haired people, red-haired people living in North Africa. They are descendants of the Vandals. Egypt here, of course, very populous. Palestine and Syria, again very populous, very well developed. There were metropolitan cities, important church centres in Antioch, Jerusalem, Alexandria, and of course in the new capital founded by Emperor Constantine in the 4th century, about 330, 340, situated on the Bosphorus. and they had access to the Black Sea. And what's interesting from this map is here is Crimea, and southern Crimea, Cherson area, was actually a Roman colony. Armenia is disputed because the people were Christian, but the Sassanid Empire, before the rise of Prophet Muhammad, they were under Zoroastrian influence, and they wanted to extend their influence, and they asked Justinian, when he came to power, would they help him out, and he did. And there was ongoing tussles and fights over territory and skirmishes and castles built and knocked down in this area. But the Armenians survived, as they survive to this day. But they were pulled between these states. At this point, the Arab people were split into tribes and not united. Justinian appoints a very capable general called Belisarius to win back the Western Empire for him. And at this point, the Eastern Empire could call on a vast number of troops from Greece, Macedonia, again Egypt, Palestine, Anatolia, and parts of North Africa. And he built up a personal force, and he copied the Sasanian tactics. So he mounted, I think it was up to 7,000 men on strong steeds, well armored. The steeds also being armored, carrying the Hunnish bow, or the Sasanian bow, it was also called, carrying swords and lances, and very well equipped, trained as heavy cataphracti, being the Roman word, and being able to take on the Vandals in North Africa. The Vandals, of course, also had mounted cavalry. But he beat them, and eventually the Vandals said, okay, we'll come under your suzerainty. Then, if you follow the lines here, he conquered Corsica with his armies. The Blue Isles took over the southern part of the Visigothic Empire. And then Justinian asked them to take over Italy again for the empire and reconquer it. And then I believe they had a plan to eventually take over the Frankish territory and all of the Visigothic territory and expand northwest towards Britain. Didn't quite get there, but still, he achieved a lot in his long reign. So he reigned from 527 to 565, the reign of Justinian, and his general Belisarius achieved so much. His toughest campaign, though, was in Italy. And what Belisarius decided to do to win the Italian people over, he carefully instructed his troops, who spoke Greek and some spoke Latin, so they were able to communicate with the local Italians, in especially in southern Italy, and the Greek-speaking communities in southern Italy. I guess some of the Goths could also speak Greek and Latin, because the Bishop Arius had converted many of them into the Arian Christian philosophy, which is different from the Catholic and Orthodox belief in that Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit are there eternally before Christ. Christ is not there eternally with God and the Holy Spirit. Christ comes after. And the Arians thought this was more logical. And I guess from a church point of view, they saw this as a little bit of a threat, because if Jesus can come after God and the Holy Spirit, then somebody can come after Jesus. So they would see that as undermining the Nicene Creed, where the three are in one. Because once you have the three in one, that's it, it's locked. you can't change it. So there's this bit of tension. It hadn't yet become a full schism. Well, you could see it was a kind of a creative mix of ideas. Justinian General Belisarius was very clever. Not only was a brilliant tactician and soldier, he, to my mind, and I've mentioned this before in the past, introduced a real concept of the values of war and the values of chivalry. And I'm going to prove this to you factually. There's a famous book, The Wars of Justinian, by Procopius. And Procopius was educated in Palestine area, Palestine, Syria, and he spoke and wrote in Latin and Greek. He had a good education, and he was appointed to write about the whole campaign and document it. And this book came out at the end of the 6th century after Justinian died. It was published in Constantinople, and the book was a bestseller and it found its way throughout the whole of the empire. And I believe it was used as a source book on military strategy and how to win over an enemy people using a hearts and minds strategy. And what actually are the rules of war? How do you deal with captured enemies and your children, and how do you make peace after the battles are over? It may be that because Justinian and Belisarius were more sympathetic to the Arian and Orthodox creed than the Nicene Catholic creed, that for this reason the Catholic powers in Middle-aged Europe played down the significance of this book. So it might be a bit of a kind of, hey, what did Procopius write about Justinian's wars? Let's have a quick look. Let's not tell anybody about it. Because, there was censorship. And because Procopius and Justinian and Belisarius were successful, they would be a bit of jealousy, and that comes out later on, but in another book, but I don't want to go into it right now. I want to talk about Justinian's Hearts and Minds campaign, and I've gone, as I said, to this book, and this is from the Wars of Justinian, and it's Book 7, paragraph 5. And what I've done is I'm going to read the whole passage to you. And then, if you're interested in following this, think about the wars that we've had in Europe and the Middle East since the end of the Ottoman Empire, First and Second World Wars, terrible destruction, and what we're seeing today in Gaza and Palestine and Israel. The people of Byzantium, their name for Constantinople, took delight in watching General Belisarius as he came out of his house every day and went to the forum, or as he returned to his house, and none of them could get enough of his sight, for his movements resembled a crowded festival procession, as he was always escorted by a large number of Goths from central Italy and the areas around here, Vandals, the ones he'd managed to win over in North Africa, and Moors being the Bedouin people from North Africa, and some from Arabia as well. Furthermore, he had a fine figure and was tall and remarkably handsome. But his conduct was so affable and gentle to those who met him that he seemed like a poor man of no account. As a commander, the love that was ever felt for him by soldiers and peasants was irresistible, because he was the most generous of all people towards soldiers. When they were defeated in battle, he used to console them with large presents of money for the wounds that they had received, and he presented bracelets and necklaces to those that had distinguished themselves to wear as prizes. When a soldier had lost his horse or bow or anything else whatsoever in battle, Belisarius immediately provided another in its place. And here's the important part, again, if you reflect on what's been going on for the last 150 years. As for his treatment of peasants and farm people and townspeople, he showed so much restraint and consideration for them that they never suffered any violence when he was a general. Rather, all those whose land was visited by a large army unexpectedly found that they were enriched, for they always got their own price for everything that they sold. And whenever the crops were ripe, Belisarius used to watch closely that the cavalry and horsemen and wagons in passing should not damage any man's grain. When the fruit was ripe in the trees, not a single man was permitted to touch it. Furthermore, he possessed extraordinary restraint to such a degree so that he never touched any woman other than his wife. Although he took so many captive women from both the Vandals and the Goths, and such beautiful women as no man in the world, I suppose, had ever seen. He refused to allow any of them in his presence or meet him in any way. In addition to his other qualities, he was remarkably quick-witted and able to decide the best course of action in difficult situations. In the dangers of war, he was courageous without losing his cool judgment. A bit like Caesar, maybe. Yeah. And furthermore, in paragraph 20, he used to equip 7,000 horsemen from his own expenses, and not one of them was to be looked down upon. And so this was really a remarkable achievement, and I think it elevated the Christian concepts to such an extent that it softened the impact of war and allowed Christians to become soldiers and live and die honourably without unnecessary violence and corruption, etc. And this heritage, I believe, was passed on quite soon after, because it's about 100 years later, the Lombards come down and they take over Italy. Again, they're Arian Christians, and Lombardy today is called after them. The Umayyad Caliphate breaks out of Arabia and conquers a large part, takes over this Sasanian Empire here, begins to make incursions into Anatolia. Of course, Arabia becomes the center of Islam with Egypt. They break across North Africa, and eventually, of course, they cross over into Spain. They contest with Sicily, but they don't take over Italy. They fail. However, in in the Islamic Rose of War, I believe it's Omar, who succeeded the Prophet Muhammad. If you read his advice, it follows Belisarius' advice very carefully. There's some difference, on the treatment of captives and slaves, etc. So it's not exactly the same, but it's very, very similar in tone. How to be just in war, how to defeat people that are not on your side without being cruel to them. And going back to Belisarius and Justinian, you might say, well, why did they take Italy? They should have just left it. Well, in actual fact, after Theodoric the Goth, who ruled a large part of Italy for the Goths, after he died, there was a succession dispute, and one of the Goth princes had gone to the court of Constantinople and asked Justinian, can you help him out and win the kingdom for him? And so there was a little bit of play going on, but it's an exemplary example of where we have not achieved what we should be achieving in warfare and civilian life and our treatment of each other. So I'll leave that with you. I hope you can follow up. I recommend Epic History, parts 1 to 4 on the Wars of Justinian, and also you can buy this map. There's a lot of good stuff coming out from Epic History and Kings and Generals, and I'd like to recommend the 2 channels. And my son is maybe going to just put in a short part on this video. So thank you again, and best wishes until we meet again around about Easter time. Thank you.
532 AD. Constantinople, the greatest city in the world, is in flames. But this is no barbarian attack. Citizens of the Eastern Roman Empire are rioting, murdering state officials and setting buildings on fire. Trapped inside his own palace, Emperor Justinian fears his reign is over. He's already given in to the mob's demands and sacked his most hated officials. But now the crowds acclaim a new emperor, Hypatius. It's his wife, Empress Theodora, who'll give him the courage to act, and his most trusted general, Belisarius, to whom he'll turn to crush his enemies and save the regime. After centuries of imperial crisis, Justinian's reign will witness a Roman fightback that few had dreamed possible. Great victories over the barbarians, the reconquest of Rome itself, the reunification of the empire. Belisarius is the commander who will lead this onslaught. He will be remembered as Rome's last great general. (527 AD). It's more than 50 years since the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Rome itself, the eternal city, is now part of an Ostrogothic kingdom of Italy. But though Rome may have fallen, the empire endures. The Eastern Roman Empire remains a force to be reckoned with. An estimated 30 million people live under the rule of the emperor in Constantinople. His authority stretches from the ravaged Balkans to the imperial breadbasket, Egypt, the Arabian desert to the mountains of Armenia. This Christian empire remains unrivaled in administrative sophistication, economic power, and military might. But the new emperor, Justinian, faces formidable challenges. In 527, he succeeds Justin, his uncle and adopted father, becoming the first son to succeed his father as emperor in more than a century. Justinian is from a tough peasant background in Illyricum, what's now North Macedonia. He's highly educated, restless and driven, and sets himself two ambitious goals. First, to restore harmony in the Christian Church by ending the schism between Chalcedonian or Orthodox Christians and Miaphysites, who argue over Christ's human and divine nature. Second, to reform and rationalize Roman law, the divinely sanctioned institution that distinguishes the Roman world from the barbarian. The imperial majesty should not only be adorned with arms, but also be armed with laws, so that there may be good government in times both of war and peace, he later declares. But as for any Roman emperor, the ultimate test of his legitimacy will come in war. For now, Justinian has good relations with the Vandals in North Africa and the Ostrogoths in Italy. The Balkan frontier requires constant vigilance. The successors to Attila's Hun Empire are never quiet for long. But it's in the east that Justinian faces his most immediate challenge: the Persian Sassanid Empire, a rival superpower of the Middle East. This frontier has been a battleground for centuries and witnessed its share of Roman defeats, including one emperor captured, another killed. For most of the last century, the shared menace of the Huns led to a wary coexistence. But it could not last. In 525, the Christian king of Iberia in the Caucasus appealed to the Romans for aid when the Persian king Kavad tried to impose Zoroastrian rituals on his country. The Romans send military aid, and the conflict escalates, with both sides launching cross-border raids. When the Romans begin building a new fort at Minduos, the Persians attack, rout the Roman troops, and destroy the building works. One of the Roman generals to escape this debacle is Flavius Belisarius. Clearly he is not blamed, because the next year Justinian makes him commander of all Roman troops in the east, though he's barely 30 years old. Belisarius and the emperor are old comrades, and come from similar rural backgrounds in the Balkans.